Hi guys, my name is Naythan Din-Kariuki. You're watching Shaping African Conversations. In a couple of weeks, we'll be kicking off my favorite time of the year, the FIFA World Cup. The World Cup has grown from a small regional tournament of 13 teams, mainly made up of European and South American teams, to being this global event that influences not only our sports, but our culture and, perhaps most importantly, even our politics. For the first few editions of the World Cup, African teams weren't really welcome. For the first 4 or 5 editions, no African teams were present, with the exception of Egypt in 1934. And even with decolonization and the '66 World Cup and African teams their first opportunity to be a part of this global spectacle, FIFA didn't offer us the chance. They offered us one shared qualification space with Asia and Oceania. All African countries decided to boycott the World Cup, and no teams went. And in 1970, we got our first teams regularly competing. And every edition since, African teams have grown and grown, and our reputation has grown worldwide. So today we'll be discussing how Africa is now shaping the conversation about football globally. So let's start off with the 1970 World Cup. We get one qualification spot, and we're a bit of an unknown. You know, teams have this idea that they don't really have to worry about the African sides. And for the first few editions, they were right. It wasn't until 1978 when Tunisia managed to grab the first ever win for an African team, when they came back from 1-0 down to beat Mexico. After Tunisia got the ball rolling for the continent, the strength of African teams has grown, and we've gone from this unknown commodity to being truly some of the best sides in the world. You only have to look at 1990, where Roger Milla and Cameroon shocked the world, and the famous dance of him with the corner flag. African teams had finally arrived. We were ready to compete amongst the best in the world. In 1994, Nigeria competed in the World Cup for the first time in the US. And that was that Argentina team with the great Diego Maradona. And Nigeria took them all the way, they beat them. Coming to 2002 and the increased size of the World Cup, African teams would now have five places. Senegal were drawn alongside defending champions France in Group A. In the opening game of the tournament, Senegal, who was in their first time at the World Cup, this unknown commodity, shocked the world. They beat the defending champions France. It ended up costing France their title. They went out at the group stages. Fast forward a couple editions of the World Cup, and we're in 2010. We'd come full circle. In '66, we weren't invited. We weren't wanted at the World Cup. And in 2010, it was ours. The World Cup was hosted in Africa. South Africa put on what FIFA described as perhaps the best ever World Cup. South Africa had set the standard. Africa had set the standard. But it wasn't just in the organization. It was also the edition that saw Ghana be one Luis Suarez handball away from the semi-finals of the World Cup. And now if you ask me, I think if they got to that semi-final, they were going to get to that final, and I think they could have won it. They had the entire continent behind them. But my own personal feelings for Luis Suarez, we won't get into them. And now we're here in 2018 with the World Cup in Russia. 5 African teams will be going again. Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt, Senegal, Nigeria. All of these are fantastic sides with a legitimate chance of making some real noise in the competition. In fact, probably one of the best players of the competition is going to be an Egyptian, Mo Salah. The idea of African football has come from a bunch of teams who didn't really know the rules. The world kind of laughed at us and couldn't buy a win. And now we're competing with some of the best in the world. But it's not just limited to the World Cup. Africa's importance to FIFA has grown and grown ever since the '70s. It started with a man called Yao Havelange, who was president of FIFA. He was the first to realize that FIFA's one member, one vote system for deciding president meant that Africa needed to have a bigger say. Traditionally, FIFA presidents had concentrated on what the Europeans wanted, or even what the South Americans wanted, but never before had Africans been asked what they wanted. And it was Havelange, a Brazilian, who realized that it was actually Africa where the key was. And today, FIFA elections tend to be decided by what Africa wants. Infantino, current FIFA president, he had to cater to what the African states needed. It was through the African states in which he won election to FIFA. And that's just not FIFA presidency. The recent changes in how they decide who hosts the World Cup, Africa's importance has grown. Before, it was an executive committee that picked the World Cup. Now it's gone to the one member, one state. And for the 2026 World Cup, an African nation is bidding to host the World Cup again, this time Morocco. Morocco's fate at being the potential host of the World Cup is very much so dependent on what other African nations want. If they manage to cater to all other African nations, it will be them who decide where the World Cup goes. So let's just take a moment to appreciate just how far African football has come, from not being wanted, to competing, to hosting the World Cup, and today probably being one of the most important confederations FIFA has. African football is truly shaping the global football conversation.